The folks are here. Hi, folks. Well, thanks for joining us today. This is the wrap-up week, the last week, and I want to take a moment to introduce to you, if I could, Brian Mcdonald. Brian is Chauncey that you hear invite you folks in at the start of every session. I want to take a few moments and thank Brian because he does this as a courtesy off the side of his desk. We talked in this class about citizenship and about employees. Well, Brian is one of the citizens of Royal Roads. He can make a difference. As Guy Walters Road said, this is his world, and he makes it all happen. So I want to take a moment and just introduce you to Brian. Brian, thanks very much for everything you've done for us.
You're welcome.
Good.
Yeah. Is that it?
That's it. You're away. Good man. Wanted to take that second and just introduce Brian to you. I want to be respectful of your time. But also Anthony Manning. Anthony takes the video that Brian makes and gets it up for us every week. So both those folks really make a difference in my life. Without them, I couldn't do what we do. So thank you. In fact, it was Jerry Kelly, one of our first presidents of the university, commented one time that he was talking about to me at the time of the Kelly Award things, and he said, Terry, he said, you folks like the Top Guns, that John Cruise movie, but it's the Bryans and the Anthonys and the support staff and the program office that keep us in the air and flying, and without them we couldn't do what we do. And so I want to respect that and bring it to your attention that I couldn't do what I could do without this team behind us. And another wingman I have is Sandy. Bless Sandy's heart. She sent me a note yesterday. She's busy marking up there. Grades are looking well. In fact, maybe a little on the high side, so not an issue. If you earn an A, you get an A. There's no bell curve in this class, so but she's banging away on them. She hopes I'm all ready for you by next Friday. She's trying to do 6 a day, and the reason it's taking so long is I went through and I've prepared with some help from some of the things from the course site, or from the textbook site as well, about 22 pages of feedback for you. So some of it, a large part of it is boilerplate, but I wanted you to have it. You won't have to do 22 pages on the exam. I don't expect 22 pages on your assignments. But I thought when you leave us, it would be helpful in your kit bag if you had a complete Porter's Five Forces, for example, of 6 or 7 pages, showing how it all looks. If you're going to do consulting your OMP, you should find some good, full and complete answers in there to give you a sense of it all. So Sandy's putting that together and going through your papers and chatting with me at the ends of the day. So I want to thank Sandy for doing what she's done in this course. It's made it quite successful and just a delight to work with. And many of us expressed your opinions of how good she is. So pleased to have and pleased to be working with Sandy. Monday, the time you get this is Tuesday, so it's the first of the 8th week you'll get from me the exam. Everything but the questions. But you'll get the 2 parts, A and B. Part A, as I've said, is 6 questions, do 5. They're short little snappers. Time will be your enemy on this. You'll know more than you need to get through it. But sit down and do your time appreciation on 90 minutes for Part A, and 5 questions. How much time you got per minute and how much can you write? So it's that level, that surface level I'm looking for. And every answer is different. There's no wrong, right answers. It's not, as I say, those 10 points on page 69 that I'm looking for. It's I want you to tell me in your own words, in relationship to strategy and the cases we've read and the discussions we've had, how the context of the statements and things I make turn out. If I say a ship without a rudder is like a company without a strategy, something like that idea. How does that relate to strategy? And talk to me for a little bit and weave in what you can. But I'm sure you'll do well. The second part is a case, and on that Monday, I'm going to give you that case as well. And you can open it up. It's in your textbook. And I don't mind. I encourage you to sit down with your teams, kick it around. What questions is that old fart going to ask us? Try to figure out what the questions might be. If there's ratios, have a look at them. Memorize 5 or 6 ratios. If you see some ratios in there, might be helpful for your answers. And you can rehearse, come practice. And then when you come into the exam, Part B, you got 90 minutes. I'm going to give you 5 questions. They're all mandatory. Just do the questions. It's closed book, and we have to give you that. I wanted to, and I might have touched upon earlier in the class, these are just rambling points, but stuff I've learned over the years. If you want to be successful in life, I talked in terms of 3 things. One was the books. Make sure that you read books in your area, and I think I've covered this, that books in your area, your field, and you can find 10 or 15 minutes a day and extend that out for 30 days. You'll find you get 7 to 8 hours a month, and that's enough time to read a book on business or on marketing or artificial intelligence, whatever you decide you want to read. but I always travel with a book in my book bag, ready to look at something. And after books comes the idea of hanging around with like-minded folks, smart people, people that are in your industry, people who are the movers and shakers that are really anxious to learn, have a passion for this. As I said, Dizzy Gillespie said, if you can't feel it, you can't play it. Those are the people you want to be with. And then finally, set goals for yourself, like your goal to finish this course, and set your goals. And then if anything interferes with that goal, cut the suckers off, that rosebush analogy. Get rid of them. The other thing I learned at an early age, when I was taking my junior NCO course, I just turned 16. I lied about my age joining the military. And an old wily curmudgeon sergeant came up. It was towards the end of his system, but he was acting as one of the instructors. And he took me out and gave me some good advice on leadership. He says, Terry, it's all about the 3 Fs. The 3 Fs. Fair, firm, and friendly. And it's 70 years later, not quite 70, 60 years later. I still remember those words, and I still try to apply them in my daily life. I leave that with you. You may be interested in that. Finally, I guess towards the end of it, we've had a number of conversations in this course with a number of people, really unrelated to the course, but things I want to talk about. I think I've got back to all of you, but if I didn't, I'm sorry, there's been so many balls up in the air I could have missed. But let me say this, and I mean it sincerely, just because the course is over at the end of next week, you can reach me anytime over the years. You've got things you want to bounce ideas off of. Give me a call, pro bono, pleased to chat and share whatever thoughts I have to assist you and help you succeed. So I said this is the wrap-up session, week 8. This is all about, I offer to you, and there's many different models you can use. This is the Waterfall Method that I use. And even though I lay it out for you in a linear fashion, strategy really isn't linear. You're zooming in and zooming out all the time, watching for those stormtroopers as you do it. But you can start with that, and you do the 3 C's, the customer, the company, and the competition. Those little circles, you populate them with models and data and information the best you can find and drop it out on the table. And then you're looking for that little sweet spot, that A sweet spot as to who those people are. Those are your targets. That's where your mission statement is. Who are your customers? What do they value? What products? Those sort of questions should be answered in here. But before you define the strategy for dealing with those people, once you decide that's a good fit with the resources I have to deal with, I want you to look at that blue ocean strategy for a few minutes. It's so important to see in this new industrial age, this explosion that we're having of disruption, of turbulence. There's so many opportunities out there for your businesses that you'd be silly just to lock yourself down with the old metal model saying it's got to be in this pasture. Go to other pastures under that blue ocean. It's all out there for you, folks. Go look at there and see if you can't find something. I'd like to see you do it. I sent you a template along for just to keep you on track, and it's a template that's sort of all things to all people. So just take the headings that you want. If it's a marketing plan, a business plan, a strategy plan, take the headings you want. And for each heading, I've suggested to you some of the tools we've covered in this course that might be applicable to satisfy as evidence those particular points. And so I think you're armed at the end of this current week to go forward and craft and implement some strategies. And keep in mind what we've talked about in this class is that it's easy to craft. You now have the skill sets. At the end of this week, you'll have the skill sets to craft a strategy. Anybody can do it. The skill really is implementing. That's where the danger will be. It's like mergers and acquisitions. Rolling it out and implementing it is where your danger is going to be and where you're going to fail. So give a lot of considerations to the action plans and how you're going to lay this thing forward to move ahead. Now, on to the news. I read a number of articles this week, which is interesting. You recall Bitcoins. We talked earlier together in this class about Bitcoins and the emergence and how they're doing and the beating they took back down. And it's interesting, increasingly, I see that they're under attack by central banks globally and by what I call the financial elites. And they don't want us to decentralize currencies. But they do wish to centralize it, but under their control. And I can tell you it's all about billions of dollars in profits. It's about blockchain, and they want to make sure that it's not out in the public sector, the collaborative commons, if you will. They want to maintain control of it because of all the money the banks and these folks make from it. And so we found some evidence of the Bank of England, for example, declared that cryptocurrency has zero value. And then the central bank for the European Central Bank came out and said the assertion that Bitcoin is a combination of a bubble, a Ponzi scheme, and environmental disaster. And then it went on with the IMF president, Christine Lagarde, And she opined that government should consider the possibility of issuing a digital currency. And then an economist said central banks should issue their own digital currency and shut down cryptocurrencies. And so it's all about the commanding heights. Who's going to run this new industrial age currency we're talking about? And recall in this class earlier on, about 8 weeks ago, we said the Brits are already doing it, and the Americans are doing it, coming out with their own equivalent of bitcoins, but backed by the banks, and it gave the banks that sense of control. And every time you flip and do one exchange to another, it gives the banks some way to make dollars on profit centers that right now they're losing on when you just use Bitcoin to import market entry strategy, to export, to pay your bills. The banks don't get a piece of that action if you're paying by Bitcoins. And it's bothering them because the Bitcoins were taking off. So we watch for that. General Electric, there's a lot of talk about GE and bankruptcy talks. I've been looking at that. And I think it's a little premature to announce their demise. Certainly they are pruning the rosebush, there's no question. But they've got lots of assets to prune to get their statements back on side. They've got a nice sized line of credit at the bank, and they got rid of the dividends, where it used to be a blue chip stock and pension plans. That was one everybody carried in their portfolio because every year, rain or shine, you got the appreciation in the value of the stock, but you got this check coming in on dividends. Well, they've cut the dividends out. And so for all those reasons, there's no question it's going to contract. They're going to withdraw some assets, maybe a takeover target. But I don't see bankruptcy in the offering there. But there's some lessons we can learn there about management and missing that the herd that you're aiming for has migrated and gone over here, and you're still shooting your arrows over here, and there's nothing there any longer. And the same thing we'll talk about in a minute on the cars in Oshawa, plant closing and things of that nature. But it's certainly another lesson comes out of that for us in this turbulent time, and what could happen if Trump, as we said, gets thumped down below. Make sure your own line of credits for your organization and yourself personally, that you're in good financial stability and health with relationship with your banks, because like a light switch, they can change very quickly. So I'll leave that with you on that. GE, and I think that's all I wanted to talk about today on that. Let's go to the papers if we can. Ukraine's a big issue. Some of these topics, of course, being Tuesday and this next Monday, we may have already kicked around, but certainly the Ukraine, and the story is well known by now, and the 3 ships and fired upon by the Russians, etc. And it's off the peninsula of the Crimean that the Russians seized back, but it historically has been Russians' pathway to the Black Sea, so and their pipelines and the resources and gas lines, they can't afford to let it go. But they had this little dust up, and it's blown into proportion, at least as I sit here on Tuesday looking at it, and this may all unfold, and I could be wrong, but my thoughts are that first you've got a president who's coming up for elections next March, a very unpopular president in Ukraine. And there's some rumbling, some talk that this declaration of martial law that's put into place tomorrow for 90 days is really one way for him to get control back over and to put off the election, all possible. This is the other side of the hand. I mean, the side is bad Russians did what they weren't supposed to do. But let me make the argument that maybe they were good Russians. The idea that this was all about 3 foreign ships from the Ukraine going into one of the Russian ports underneath a brand new $4 billion bridge that the Russians just built, connecting Russia to the Ukraine area. And the normal practice as a mariner, and our colleagues will know this, is that you call ahead. If you're 12 miles out or within the 12-mile zone, you call ahead coming into a port and notify the port authorities that you're coming in and what you're all about. They didn't do that. And so this brand new bridge, they could have just as easily come up and put mines on the bridge and blown it up from the Russian perspective of the hand. And so there's lots there for both sides, but certainly it's heating up more than it has to for some reason, and so we want to watch that if we can. On the auto sector, we've talked about that, and no big surprise, we've got the auto sector closing down, but some observations I'll make about it is it wasn't a surprise to us in this class, was it? We've talked about robotics, artificial intelligence. How about 3D printing? We take all the plastics we're trying to get rid of, and we change our regulations slightly that on city driving we're allowed to have like electric golf carts. Well, we now can print all those 3D printing. The plans will be free, Collaborative Commons, downloaded like making bread on site. Victoria could have a little printing place where the old plastics are used and stiffened up a little bit, and pump out a model that you like, put on an electric car base, and we don't need Oshawa plants producing them and travel and bring them here. All these changes are taking place. It has shifted. But I'm disappointed too. Trump may or may not know, I don't know, but certainly Trudeau was blindsided by it all. And recall that Canada helped General GE, and don't think of any warning about this whatsoever, but you remember one of the major negotiating tactics of the Americans with the Canadians on NAFTA 2 was the idea that if you don't sign these sort of things, we're going to take away the car industry. Well, they've taken away the car industry, but we're still going along with that deal. And in fact, as I understand it, that's taking place over the next week or so, that this will be signed off on. And I'm concerned a little about that, but we've just, whatever your thoughts are. There was a mental abuse in the classroom issue here, that a teacher was found guilty of 35 years of mental and physical pain on her students in her classroom, causing great distress to a whole bunch of youngsters growing up, and was finally found guilty by the courts and given a significant fine and some other punishments. But again, out of it comes the courage. I expect you folks as master's students have the courage to speak up and to speak for others who can't speak for themselves. You're a special breed with the education that you have, and so I want you to change your mental model and be prepared to be a bit of an advocate for those that need to be helped. What else do I want to talk about here? Oh, this is the koi fish caught my we have the Sun Yat-sen's park over in Vancouver, a nice quiet little area in Chinatown. I've been there; it's quite pleasant to be in. But they have in there these 50-year-old koi fish, who 50 years is quite a length of time for fish. And some river otters got in there and has been dining on sushi and cleaning out the koi fish. And they've been trying to cap this little river otter, and get a picture in the paper, a cute little monkey, looking around the trees at us and one thing or another. But he won't go into the cage. They're offering him salmon and everything else. He won't. He just likes the fresh koi. And the oldest koi, apparently his name is Madonna, is still alive. But he's gone through at least 14 of them so far, and he comes in at night and helps himself. And on a sidebar, I live on the water out here, and my deck has been covered with river otters, and I too have a pond with, I buy the smaller goldfish and leave them, but they're getting pretty big and fat. I had about 20, 30 of them in there. And at night they come up and just raid the place. No matter what I do, sure to put a net across. And so I have some empathy with the park, trying to keep the river otter out of it, but it made me smile to look at it. Alberta wages war with Ontario over beer costs, and its barriers, interprovincial barriers to trade, what it's all about. That Ontario wants to put a barrier up to prevent Alberta beer coming in, thereby increasing, or in fact stopping altogether Alberta beer coming in. And the question becomes the cost of that, and is it right? I mean, we talk about free trade and free trade with NAFTA, but yet our provinces, we don't have free trade even with our provinces. And interprovincial trade is such that we lose about $20 billion a year by foolishness like this, saying if you're bringing your trips, your truck in from Alberta to BC, the lights have to be in a certain place. If they're not, you got to reload your truck to come across the borders. And so we have to look at interprovincial trade, just free trade in Canada, before we get too upset about free trade with other countries. This was disappointing. In fact, it was staggering. The McGill University Health Centre, done by SNC Lavalin, court case just finished. I can't pronounce the last name, ELBAZ 49. He was the project manager in charge of it. Took a $10 million bribe from SNC Lavalin and found guilty of it. And a bunch of things. We talk about the mentally ethical test, clearly wouldn't pass. We talk about when he left the courtroom, he winked to his brother. Wasn't a big issue. I guess if you make $10 million, you can do the 5 or 6 years you have to do, and you're still $10 million. You're probably set for life. But also SNC Lavalin, off the top of my head, they really have screwed up their brand. And we've said in this class that in the span of minutes, you can destroy 30 years of branding. And SNC Lavalin had a great brand, but you recall we had the situation in Saudi Arabia, and this one, like the Anderson Company, I think they're going to have to change their name, change the brand, or do something, but they certainly are screwing up the SNC Lavalin name as we do it. Planet of Super Babies, we talked about what's going on, the Chinese and adjusting the Lulu and Nana and the gene technology. that they're going through over there. And you can make these super babies. They can be soldiers. They can have 50 points higher IQs. There's ethics involved, all sorts of questions. The Premier of Ontario, Ford, is talking about, and keep in mind Ontario's got debt and deficit problems big time, and he's trying to prune the rosebush. He's cutting back. So one of the things he cut out was the financing for a Francophone university for Ontario, as well as eliminating the office of the French Language Services Commissioner. Both those could be an affront to we're a bilingual nation on two languages, but he's cut both these out. No funding to start a brand new French university, and the commissioner's office is not going to be funded. We could talk about that this week. Trudeau again, Alberta, the pipeline patronizing, just got raked over the coals. Again, Notley from Alberta has made the point that it's $80 million a day that we lose in the revenue stream by not being able to get this oil out of the ground and sent to our customers. A total of $13 billion in the first 10 months of 2018 has been lost. And Trudeau came out, met with the Chamber of Commerce in Calgary, certainly acknowledged very much it's a crisis, and then proceeded to say there's not much they could do about it. And it was observed that Liberals haven't seen anything urgent in Alberta for the last 60 years. And you may recall that Trudeau's father, Trudeau Sr., was, well, Plato and Aristotle, was oil and vinegar, oil and water. They could never get along, and so as a result, Liberals never had a seat in Alberta. It was always the Conservatives had the seat out in that area, and it looks like we're going back into that sort of age that I don't think Albertans are in a rush to support the Liberal Party, but I could be wrong on that. This is one caused me some heartburn. Keep in mind we have debt and deficit. We don't have enough money. We have to borrow the money to make it happen. But we're taking $600 million over the next 5 years, and we're giving it to journalists. And journalists was announced by Bill Morneau, our finance minister, and they're going to use it to support labor costs and to employ journalists so we can get some more real news out there. And they give over another $1 billion to the CBC. They're giving over $1 billion to CBC and $71 million to magazines like Maclean's magazines and things like that. All get money from the public trough. Wow. What are your comments on that? Can we afford that? I got 5 papers today, so I'll keep pushing through them. But I want to be respectful of your time. I'll give another 10 minutes or so, 15 minutes. We've got a list here about the online shopping surveys. This Black Friday, etc., gave some numbers and data even in Canada coming in. And in Canada, it's interesting that BC broke the records of all the provinces as selling them much. $3,369 per individual in BC for online shopping. Well, it's household, sorry. Household. $3,369 per household in BC. The average across Canada was $2,748, about $600 more per household on online shopping. That's all about digital trust, that obviously we're prepared to put our credit card out there in space with greater frequency than, say, if you're in Newfoundland. And what they're buying is, and the order was the online clothing, groceries and food, and finally health and beauty products in that sequence. So a Boston Matrix should have a look at those sort of things. But equally, if the sales for online shoppings are up like a teeter-totter, then the sales for retail sales in the malls would be down. And that's verified somewhat in the American model here, that they're saying they did $7.8 billion on Cyber Monday, which was up 23% from the year before, which is a big number. Gun sales was interesting. You may ask why this could be. That firearms measured by taking the what's that we had to do, the firearms background check. They're up in the States last year. They had 203,000. This year it's only 182,000. There's a drop. So they didn't sell in many firearms for some reason. We could look at that. General Motors. Complaints about telecom soar in 2017, 2018, particularly on wireless services. The CRTC has had an avalanche of complaints coming in. Something in the order of about 15,000 complaints, up dramatically. An interesting analysis here and opinion I thought we could talk a bit about too. Is it time to pay for our data? that we own our data. The data belongs to us. It's our personal effects. We should be considering it as a private asset of you and of I. We own my data. And right now, Google and Facebook are just taking that willy-nilly without your consent that you really know about. I mean, you sign 3 or 4 pages of text at the front when you sign on to these things. But there's an argument now, and people are starting to raise the question that it's my data, and I've got a proprietary right to it. And if you want to use it, you talk to me like a record. If you want to use my music, you pay me for it. And so what do you think about that? Is it a private asset? Obsolete functions for new inner suburbs, all part of this new industrial age. The last mile of bringing food and groceries and one thing or another, and this online shopping by Amazon and that, increasingly they're looking for old warehouse buildings that normally will be knockdowns close to the downtown core, and these companies are buying these up as bulk breaking points to bring their food, bring their supplies in this online shopping, and then just that last mile, take it from there out to the. So these things are becoming highly marketable. So look in your community, you may find a bargain out there that's worth looking at. Retailers go green from the roof down. No big surprise, but increasingly solar powers, electric vehicle charging stations, bean sprouts, beehives on the roof. There's more and more of a trend going that way for buildings. Article about Calgary dodging the real estate bullet by rejecting the Winter Games, because the history has not been good on the real estate properties built up for housing athletes. Tend to lose money after the games are over on the sales, according to this article. And so they think that Calgary did well to reject it. Campbell Soup. Good case in Campbell Soup is a proxy fight going on with the Third Point, which is an independent investor. And it's all about shareholder activism. And increasingly we're seeing shareholders becoming active if a company's not being run properly or doddering or sort of incest. Family members are all running the board. Increasingly, we see individuals stepping forward and trying to take over, or threat to take it to the shareholders' fight over that to see if they can't get rid of the board. And so in this case, Campbell Soup, a long-respected name, but with 3 of its family members sitting on the board, etc., acquiesced and said, okay, you stop on the proxy vote you're calling up for next coming up, and we in turn will have you 2 seats on the board and allow you to put some input into the operations. I think the shareholders win because of that, because got some more best interest of the shareholder being observed as opposed to the family members. But worth a look of activism. Think before you die without a will. It's a lawyer. I just mentioned that to you, of course. That what sparked it was the idea of Aretha Franklin and the other singer Prince. Both died without wills. And just a dog's breakfast later on, because everything gets thrown in. So the provincial legislation in your province, where you live, will guide as to how your assets will be divided. Public trustees will be appointed, and it may not be what you had in mind. So I guess it's just a tickler to get a will. Lobsters can't get out for lobster fishing right now because of the bad southwest Nova Scotia weather conditions. They're terrible down there, and so lobsters for Christmas are always a must-do in our house. This blew me back away this morning in Victoria, a little quiet cove. $11 million downhouse condos for sale. $11 million in downtown Victoria. Interesting. Our budget in BC is on track. Said we're going to have our finance minister said for the forthcoming year with a $1.3 billion surplus. But of course what she's not saying is that $1.3 billion surplus comes from dividends paid from ICBC, BC Hydro, BC Ferries, and the list goes on, which is indirect taxes coming up. But they'll take the bow saying they ended up with a surplus. Postal Strike. We've talked a bit about the Postal Strike and the idea of what these folks are doing. I think we're beating a dead horse here. We've talked a bit about it. The aspect that 50,000 people in the Postal Service, I think the end is nigh. This idea, again, the robotics, things of that nature, emails. We should privatize this and get rid of that legacy cost of 50,000 civil servants and what to do about it. But it's maybe worth another visit. The elections are coming up next year with Trudeau on one side, of course, and as they say in Alberta, he's not a popular individual. But Andrew Scheer is coming up for the Conservative leader, take over from Harper, which is the other side of the spectrum. But hanging very close to him is Kevin O'Leary. And Kevin O'Leary is well known to most of you as a television personality and one of the folks in the Shark Tank. And in fact, he even ran as one of the leadership candidates. But he's hanging very, very close to the Conservative leader coming up to this. They're going like Tweedledee and Tweedledum to everything. In fact, you may even say that Kevin is outshadowing Andrew. You wouldn't know Andrew, but you certainly know O'Leary when you see him. And then the question becomes the tag team, if they get elected, and they could well get elected, what O'Leary gets out of this. Would he be the Deputy Prime Minister, possibly? Worth watching. The fight in the Brexit deal in the UK is well worth looking at. Very important. Lots of ramifications to this. I think May's got herself over a basket. I don't think she's going to survive, but I could be wrong. She's taking it out to the people. There's got to be a vote in the House to pass it. And the danger is, as I understand from my readings, is that if they pass this particular deal, they'll be subservient to the European Union forever. There's no way out of it. They still have to. They have to give up their fishing grounds. For hundreds of years, they've got fishing grounds out there they've used, and this deal allows for them to abandon and give up all claims to the fishing grounds. It's like Nova Scotia giving up its fishing grounds, or Newfoundland off the Grand Banks. They've had them for hundreds of years, to allow the French and others take over their property. And so it's not a good deal. We've got the 10 MPs in Northern Ireland are all against it. I don't see how it's going to pass. The question is what happens. Would they? I hope they don't have to. Do they fall back and do another referendum and play it again until they get it right? Possibly, but I hope not. But I think May is on the way out, and I think it'll go back to the EU folks saying no deal and just see what happens with that. And the very worst position, it seems to me, is that they're just thrown back on the World Trade Organization standards, and just live with that. So there's no deal. We're out of here, and whatever the World Trade Organization standards are, they're there. And other countries will step forward and do trade agreements with Britain. I think they're getting screwed if they go ahead with this thing. But what do you think? Well, I think maybe I got another paper there. I can't find it. Folks, surely there's enough in all that for have a bit of a discussion. It's been fun. I want to tell you how much I've enjoyed this class and meeting with you online in any event and talking to a great number of you by the phone. And it's a big class of 96, so I'd like to have had more time with each one of you, but it was just impossible to do. But enjoy the class, what's left of it. Keep in touch. Bye now.